morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. In the intense coverage leading up to the debut of X-Men Days of Future Past, Hugh Jackman has made a very interesting statement, which has caught the attention not just of the media, but of X-Men fans and movie fans in general. So the statement he made was, and I quote, "If I do another one," he's talking about Wolverine films, "I'm 99.9% sure it would be the last." Very interesting statement. What would lead him to say this? I think it's dangerous to make predictions about the future of one's career. You never know how things are going to go. And I think Wolverine has salvaged Hugh Jackman's career many a time and has kept him relevant in a box office draw and allowed him to maybe make some riskier choices, both in film and on the stage. I think it's afforded him a lot of freedom. So it's very risky to give up such a role. So there are two things that could be going on here. One, he senses fan fatigue with Wolverine being front and center, so maybe he wants to, take some of the pressure off, even though maybe he has no intention of leaving. Perhaps he just would have his role maybe, dialed down a bit. Or the other issue could be, of course, contract negotiations. We don't know Hugh Jackman's exact situation. He's probably he must not be contracted for another one, if you would say if. I would think he would be, considering the fact that Fox has announced the date for this film, the untitled Wolverine sequel, technically Wolverine 3 for 2017. We've discussed how it's all set for the first weekend of March, a really out-of-the-box release date when it comes to blockbusters, thinking outside the box. So it maybe would mean they were trying to push the edge of the envelope with that film, or the summer is just simply too crowded, and they see how films are performing in that window. Watchmen 300 came out then, Alice in Wonderland. It is a popular release date for blockbusters. They can succeed there. So Fox clearly wants to make another one, but I guess they didn't have the foresight, or they just didn't want to, because I guess they wanted to see how the Wolverine turned out after X-Men Origins Wolverine was so poorly received. Maybe they just decided to do a one-off for that contract, which obviously was a mistake. So you can see something going on here like Robert Downey Jr., who I think has a comparable role of importance over in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, from Disney's, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Fox has its own. But Robert Downey Jr. is really the linchpin there, and the box office draw for your mainstream fan, your non-comic book reader fan. And I think Hugh Jackman serves that purpose for the X-Men, much to the annoyance of some fans, as we just discussed. So it could totally be a contract situation where he's saying, "I might not do it," and Fox is like, "Well, how much is it going to cost us this time?" So he said basically, if he was to do another Wolverine film, if he was to sign on for this third film for 2017, he elaborated and said, James Mangold, his director on the first Wolverine, this new series of films after X-Men Origins, The Wolverine, directed by James Mangold, he said he's very good at developing scripts, which I would actually disagree with. A lot of you might know I had some problems with. I thought the Wolverine, while it was more respectful to Wolverine's background, was very vanilla. I thought it wasn't as intense or as atmospheric as it could have been. I think James Mangold just is not a very exciting director. Maybe he's a great script guy, but I think visually he is vanilla, as I said. But he's saying, I trust Mangold to really do a great job of developing the script, and if it's where I think it should be, I'll sign on, and this will be my last Wolverine film. Except for that 0.1%, which could be widened with a check with a significant amount of zeros on it. I have to say, though, I would not actually feel bad about Hugh Jackman moving on, and I'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about what Hugh Jackman else he has planned. He's going to be starring in Chappie, Neil Blomkamp's new sci-fi film with Dev Patel. I really like Neil Blomkamp's work. I loved Elysium. I loved District 9. Elysium didn't perform as well as District 9, though. It certainly didn't capture the public's attention as much, so that's not a sure bet there at all. Pan, then he's in the new Peter Pan film from Warner Brothers. He plays the villain Blackbeard, who fights Captain Hook and Peter Pan before, I guess, they have their own differences. That could be very interesting. I wish that he would. I have my own problems with that film setup. That's the one where Rooney Mara is playing Tiger Lily, much to the annoyance of many fans and viewers. But I just feel Hugh Jackman would make a fantastic Captain Hook, and I feel they're complicating the story perhaps a little unnecessarily. And of course, they have a lot of competition from Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, who have really defined movie pirates for this era. So they're going to have to really, deliver. So, but Hugh Jackman, I think he could potentially very much shine in that role. Then I think the most interesting thing he has on his resume or his slate coming up is The Greatest Showman on Earth. It's a musical, and it's about P.T. Barnum and how he, created his very, famous, legendary circus. And you know, I think the musical is only somewhat well received, but I think it could be a very pretty, beautiful, atmospheric film. I think it could be really good, and I think that's a good role for Hugh Jackman. And of course, we all know he's a very good singer, and he's gotten some legitimacy with that, at least on the silver screen, through Les Mis. And he didn't win the Oscar, but he got those nominations, and he's certainly very. I think people now, instead of making jokes about Wolverine the musical, they respect him as a musical talent on the big screen as well. So I think that I still see room for a Wolverine there to anchor that. I think he needs that still on his resume. So if I was on his management team, I would be telling him to sign on, at the very least, for another Wolverine film. Now, I also hope, though, going into this third film, not only do I blame Mangold for the way it turned out, but I feel that Jackman, his choices to film in Australia and substitute Australia, his native Australia, for Japan, added to the problem. You couldn't really have that authentic Japanese feel. I mean, and when the few moments when it did, with, like, for instance, they were in the chase with Mariko in the stores, that was very interesting. The hotel was very cool that they visited, and then of course that village at the end, in that scene leading up to the headquarters of that company, that was interesting. And the things that happened in Mariko's household, which was very atmospheric, were also pretty good. But of course, they couldn't really have location shoots because they weren't actually on location. Now I can totally understand that Hugh Jackman wanted to bring jobs to his native Australia, and that's very commendable. But at the same time, I would hope that if they do make this third Wolverine film, and they're probably going to make it, I think he'll sign on, and Fox, as we said, has already dated it. I hope they do actually shoot in Japan. I think that's really important. Or if he goes to Madripoor, something that looks more like Madripoor than Australia. But then let's move on to what the X-Men universe would be like if Hugh Jackman were to leave. If he were to stay true to this statement, if it wasn't just contract negotiations, but if he was genuine. I think the franchise could definitely succeed, and I think this is a fantastic opportunity for another X-Men to step up to the front and to be the anchor for this series. And I have to say, I'd really like to see it be Cyclops. They have an opportunity to recast the role with the time problems they've created, now with X-Men Days of Future Past going into X-Men Apocalypse. They've created a scenario where they can bring on a new Cyclops, and I really want them to explore the darker Cyclops that's being explored in the comics right now. Cyclops has always been, I think, an interesting character, certainly much better than he has been in the films. No offense to James Marsden, I think it was not a well realized role to begin with, and then when Hugh Jackman took off, Fox and Singer kind of threw Cyclops under the bus. And I think, I can see where that happened. I mean, they had such a hot commodity in Wolverine, and Wolverine had his day. He's anchored this, as we just were discussing, he's anchored this series for a very long time. So now let it be Cyclops' this turn. Cyclops has become such a fascinating character. Maybe he could be one of Apocalypse's horsemen if they don't do the Age of Apocalypse storyline. We'll see how exactly that's boiling down. But the fact that Cyclops was the first student of Xavier and has become kind of this revolutionary leader who, people have said, like, the new Magneto, but, it always was like, oh, it's Martin Luther King Jr. versus Malcolm X. That's your Magneto and your Xavier. But, Magneto had such horrible things that he did that it kind of was, a little bit more extreme than, of course, Malcolm X. It started to more verge into the he's what he hated most, with his Nazi background, being persecuted by the Nazis during World War II. Magneto became what he hated. And so I think the Nazi metaphor is kind of bled into Magneto's portrayal. But I think Cyclops has become a true Malcolm X type figure. And I really am fascinated by the way it's being depicted. I just read a great all-new X-Men just yesterday that Bendis wrote, and Cyclops has become so nuanced with so many shades of gray to his personality, being both a stand-up good guy and this really militant revolutionary at the same time. Is fascinating to see how that exists in one person, that storm inside. And I think it's a great opportunity for an actor. So I would love to see that be the next phase, when Cyclops, they're able to introduce him properly and make him the really dynamic, bold, because I think that's also a character we don't see very much on the big screen. I think Wolverine became a popular kind of, archetype that is often seen in movies, the anti-hero, the Clint Eastwood, the Mel Gibson. We've seen that. But I think we very rarely see the good guy who who has darkness to him. I think that's I think Star Wars to some degree has tried to explore that with Darth Vader, but it didn't quite work out. But I think this could be fascinating to see. So that's that's the first story of the day. What do you think? Do you think Hugh Jackman really does intend to leave after the third Wolverine, or the sequel to the Wolverine? How do you think the franchise? Do you think it's a mistake for him? And how do you think the franchise will fare post Hugh Jackman? Do you think they should recast the role of Wolverine, or would you like to see Cyclops come to the front, or maybe another X-Men? Do you think somebody else could step up to the plate and lead this franchise? All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that apparently, after you watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there's like some, they're calling it a stinger. You can go into this special app and you can download some content that's really a teaser for the Sinister Six movie. So it seems like a lot of steps to me. I really kind of wish they just had 2 after-credit sequences. This X-Men one that everyone's been talking about, which is really just a scene from X-Men Days of Future Past, and then maybe this stinger. But anyway, because we have things like the internet, another website just downloaded it and told us what was on it. So basically, it's 6 images that tease the members of the Sinister Six, which rumor is will start shooting perhaps as early as January. And it's so fascinating to see this unfold because Drew Goddard, who's directing and writing, and it's clear they're really going to make these villains, which I think is fascinating to see if they can succeed in making an all-villain movie. Who do villains fight? Are we supposed to root against the hero? It's a fascinating scenario. But I think that Drew Goddard with the Cabin in the Woods is the right choice to see if he can pull this off. But anyway, he's still the showrunner on Netflix's Daredevil series, so he's going to be doing both of these things. And again, as I've pointed out before, that really just underlines the close relationship between Sony and Disney and their Marvel properties. They've accepted that they coexist. So I think that's fascinating, and I do feel maybe someday there will be that eventual crossover. But anyway, and it's interesting because Spider-Man does have a close relationship with the Defenders, the characters who are going to be on the Netflix series. Luke Cage, Daredevil, Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones. But anyway, who are the Secret Six that they've teased? Green Goblin. Okay, so by the way, for the rest of this episode, this is kind of heading into semi-spoiler territory for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I was very surprised yesterday how many people seemed to be, a decent number of people. Most people still did know, but a decent number of people had no idea of some of the twists that are at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm going to try not to divulge anything in this second story. In the third, there will be a direct spoiler discussion, so I'll give you another opportunity to jump out then. But I feel I'm discussing stuff that's pretty common knowledge that everybody knows about and has been really well known, not just through the comics, but on the internet. So I'm just giving fair warning. And if you've managed to stay, spoiler-free so far, as I said yesterday, I'm very impressed, and I don't want to be the one to ruin it. And I do apologize to anybody who I accidentally gave a spoiler to yesterday. It just seemed such common knowledge, and I was using things just from the trailers. I didn't even take screen grabs from the movie, which, by the way, are totally online, which I found when I was looking for shots for that video, for images. But anyway, all right, so if you don't want, this is an implied spoiler, so click away, go to the viewer question if you don't want to hear these things. Okay, so the Sinister Six lineup would be the Green Goblin, apparently, Dr. Octopus, Rhino, Vulture, Kraven, and then Mysterio. Or some people are saying it might be the Chameleon, which would be an interesting choice because the Chameleon would be almost like a male Mystique. And that would, I think Mystique is obviously also, besides Wolverine, the most popular X-Men character in the movies. So it would be very smart of Sony to try and create their own version of that. But I think it's Mysterio based on the smoke rising from the eye. But that's actually the image that interested me the most. I really liked the job they did there. It really captured my attention for some reason. It really, intrigued me. I thought it was a very imaginative depiction of Mysterio and made it seem very cool. And Mysterio has had a lot of trouble seeming very cool. Perhaps he'll try and build off of the Ultimate Mysterio, which is his head's just like a giant smoke flame. But we'll see. So I think this is an interesting lineup. As I said, Mysterio Chameleon makes me the most interested. Also, another thing, I read the new Spider-Man comic where Peter Parker is back in his own body again. And if you read all the backup stories, it was really interesting to see how they were positioning the characters in the comics to really reflect what's going on in the movies. You had Electro have an accident that made him very Electro-y from the movies, although he's still white, and the Electro in the cinematic universe is still black Jamie Foxx. And then also Black Cat had a big storyline, so they were obviously playing her up. And I just thought it was really interesting to see what they're working with, and that the comics still are very, very much correlating with the movies. And this is a scenario, that the things that happen in the Fox movies don't really are reflected in the Marvel comics. But this is another situation where Marvel realizes that they are with Sony for the long run, and they're playing ball with them. So you're seeing choices made in the cinematic universe for Spider-Man reflected in the comics as well. So I'm curious what you guys think of that lineup: Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Rhino, Vulture, Kraven, and Mysterio. Or do you think it would be Chameleon? What do you think of the idea of a male Mystique? And do you like that lineup? Are you excited for this movie at all? I mean, Sony's pushing it pretty hard, but I don't really sense a lot of interest on the internet. I think there's some interest that they're going to do it, but I think people are more interested in seeing Spider-Man fight the Sinister Six than kind of just hanging out with the Sinister Six, just us and those villains. All right, so that's the second story of the day. All right, so now for the third story of the day, there was a big story that a lot of people liked yesterday, that for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, McDonald's has their Happy Meal toys, both the male and the female side of the toys. Usually, McDonald's always splits it. They have a boy-friendly toy and a girl-friendly toy. But for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, they've actually created two lines of toys, one for boys, one for girls. And so the whole Happy Meal, instead of being split between two different properties, is all the Amazing Spider-Man 2. And a lot of people thought this was really great because, it acknowledged that a lot of young girls do like superhero characters. I did I think a woman who reads comics was a girl who liked comics. And so I always wanted the boy side of the Happy Meal toy too. And so, I think that it's nice to see that maybe they're creating something where everyone can be happy and reaching out to more fans. And perhaps the movies are also responsible for creating more female fans for these characters. I've met a lot of a couple women recently who have said, I'm really into comics because of the movies. I want to get more into the comics because of the movies. So I think that's a fascinating and wonderful side effect. So anyway, now spoiler territory. This is a genuine spoiler. Again, I feel almost everybody knows this, but if you want to continue to stay as spoiler-free as possible, go to the viewer question now. Okay, I've warned you, spoiler territory talking now. All right, so as we've all been told and been leaked, and we've seen from the ads, and it's been heavily foreshadowed, Emma Stone herself has admitted in interviews practically, Gwen Stacy dies in this movie. So I just think, though, that it's a little bit of bad taste to really play up the toys for the girl side toys, really play up the Gwen Stacy angle. There's a headband, and it's very much, since it's pink and purple versions of Spider-Man toys, instead of, say, black cat toys, or, something that's a female superhero. Instead, it's really playing up the Peter Parker Spider-Man girlfriend angle. I think that's such an interesting stance to take, and perhaps in bad taste, considering the fact that Peter Parker his girlfriend dies horribly. And I'm seeing the movie. I haven't seen it yet. And I don't know how she dies, but obviously she doesn't want to die. She doesn't sacrifice herself. And she dies as a direct result of dating Spider-Man. So I think that it's just an odd choice to have all these little girls buy these toys and be like, I like Spider-Man, I want to be Spider-Man's girlfriend maybe, I love Gwen Stacy, and then go and see the movie, and then she's killed. And I just, and again, it's playing up the girlfriend role. I mean, I have heard good things about the Gwen Stacy character and how she contributes to everything in this movie, so I'm very curious to see that. I do like Emma Stone's portrayal of the character, and I think it's great to maybe have a female hero who maybe doesn't have superpowers. Her superpower is that she's smart, but she's also dead. So I think that that's something that, I think is maybe makes this a tricky scenario to play up. Wouldn't it be great to be Peter Parker's girlfriend? All right, so that's my issue on the Happy Meal toys. So now on to the viewer question. Okay, everybody who came back, who skipped ahead, welcome back to non-spoiler territory. This question comes from Esquiwell, Maine. What's just his username? It's actually Jack. So Esquiwell, Maine, aka Jack, says, "Hi Grace, love the show. This just came to me. This just came to me. Will Phil Coulson be in the Avengers Age of Ultron? And if not, how is his future looking for Marvel films? Because I don't think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will continue for a second season. Even though I watch it, it's not the best. Thank you again, Jack." Great question, Jack. And I picked this because I really miss Agent Coulson. I do not watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I tried with the premiere. I really disliked it. I've tried to check in a couple of times. It not only has a very TV feel to it, but it feels so small in comparison to the films. It almost seems, like fan-created content, not professional content. And I really feel that Agent Coulson, or Coulson, I think you guys said it's Coulson. I think Phil Coulson really deserves better. He was my favorite part of the movies. I loved his interaction with the Avengers. He doesn't interact with them anymore because the big Avengers are too big to come on his show. So I really do miss him there. I think some of his moments in the Avengers were some of the best. And I think he has a really great rapport. I loved when he questioned Thor in the first Thor movie. I think that the actor Clark Gregg is very talented. And I kind of liked his everyman, but smart and in his own right, a contender in his own right, someone who can hold his own. He was one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top agents. I really liked that persona in the movies. I mean, to some degree, as I've said before, he was us. So I think a lot of us really identified with him, and that was so much so that Marvel decided to give him his own television show, which at the time seemed like a great idea, but just it didn't materialize to most people's preferences, what we would have liked to have seen. And as a result, though, because he's so busy on this television show, Clark Gregg did not show up in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and he wasn't in Thor, the Dark World. And as I said, he's Cap's biggest fan. Not to have him in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I felt was a really missed opportunity, especially since they were running around the S.H.I.E.L.D. offices for the whole movie. Where is Clark Gregg? Where is Agent Phil Coulson? Now, some of you might have an answer to that who watched the show, but I really missed him. And instead, you had Jasper Sitwell come in there, and it just wasn't the same. Of course, Agent Coulson obviously would never, spoiler, if you haven't seen Captain America, the Winter Soldier, click away, he would never join Hydra. Unless he was undercover. All right, so anyway, yeah, I think that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. probably will not continue. I would be surprised. I mean, if it were to continue, it would be really just Disney and Marvel saving face. But I think that I don't know if he's going to come back to the movies. I mean, I don't know whether they're in a difficult scenario, because I think every time he would show up on the screen in the movies, he would just be a reminder that the television show didn't work. It's really a tough call. I have such strong feelings and such, nice memories of Coulson in these films that I would just have him come back, I have to say. I would, at least for a cameo. But I don't know, because I have to say, as soon as I think about it from a producing standpoint, he's now a TV commodity. So as soon as I put him in my movie, as soon as he pops up, everyone's just, this is like the TV show. Suddenly I'm watching TV. I think it just brings down the energy. You're supposed to have this big, expansive, exciting cinematic experience that's worthy of the big screen, and then you have a TV personality come in there. And I think it could just, even if people don't mind it, it might just, it can't help but bring down the energy of what you're watching. So I think there's a real problem here, and I'm not quite sure what to do, Jack. It really does suck. Clark Gregg rolled the dice, tried to become a TV star, have his own property at Marvel, and in the process might have lost his pretty cushy cameo job. So, and sometimes bigger than a cameo. So I'm curious to how you guys feel. Do you miss Clark Gregg, aka Agent Phil Coulson, from the movies? Or do you want to see S.H.I.E.L.D. continue for another season? Do you think it will? And if not, do you want to see, can he go back? How do you feel both as a fan and if you were from the business perspective, if you were producing or directing these movies? If you were directing another solo Avenger adventure, would you want, and they said, hey, do you want Clark Gregg? What would your answer be? Would you want him in your movie, or would you fear that he would bring things down? All right, so write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. You can comment on today's 3 stories and the viewer question, and let me know what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.